There's things you can do when you start getting there. And I realized when I was in some of our group meetings, and people start getting anxious, and you know there's going to be an argument, it's the same thing I was feeling when I was talking to my brother, or I was talking to my dad, or I was talking to the old man Slam, or I was talking to whoever it was. There's 5 or 6 people in this room that I have had online conversations with that fundamentally changed the way that I thought about some aspect of myself, or my work, or my community. Even finding something like that, once you start down that road and understanding there's anxiety out there. Once you get over it, things get a little bit easier to deal with. It doesn't always make you look really cool when you're always the first one that's, brings up the anxiety thing. It's a little bit awkward. I saw that process in my own life coming from a few really key things. Number 1, feeling anxious and not knowing why. Number 2, not knowing how to start a conversation. And I took a series of great courses. One of them was a course on leadership and psychology, where day 1, the professor said, we do what we do because that's just what we've done and it's what we know. Most of us don't think about why we do the things that we do. And I thought about that, and I was like, man, that is crazy. That's why when I run into Dawn and Cranbrook, we know we're going to eat food somewhere and joke around with mom. That's why when I know I go to Child and Family, I'm going to go see a person who's there and have coffee. That's why I know those things that are there. It wasn't an easy place to get there and see that. I don't know how many times I went with people to AA meetings and then had to get up and leave during the AA meeting, and I was like, I was there for support, and then they left, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to leave, and that's not very supportive. So I've stayed, and I've said it. I've kind of been through an interesting journey as far as those experiences, but I found some really great general rules that help. Always just sitting in and being calm and patient, and afterwards pulling someone aside and just shaking their hand or giving them a hug and saying, yeah, I really meant something to what you said. That was great. I would say before I was 30, that was not easy for me to do, and probably not something I would have ever seen myself standing in front of a group of people talking about. When I looked at how that personal kind of experience could be manifested into a group or extended to a group, I happened to be looking at this literature on trauma. What happens when you're traumatized? Well, you need to go through a process of reestablishing a coherent narrative. A coherent narrative is just a coherent way for you to be at peace with yourself so that things make sense. And if you don't have that, they kind of don't make sense, and you keep continuing to do the things you're doing, sabotaging things the way you sabotaged them before, having the same arguments with the people you care about the way you had before. So to step out of that, for an individual, is not an easy thing to do, but it's much more difficult for a community to do. These are some of the main findings. Communities that have been culturally traumatized and collectively traumatized is not the same thing as just a group and something bad happens. It means it has to be a wide-ranging effect on the values of the group. It has to be sudden, and usually people will say that it's very brutal, it's inhuman. It's like what happens when you take people and you forcefully try and change their language, their culture, their religion, their relationship to the land, whatever those are, and you do that for a century. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Even after there's some kind of liberation, people start thinking differently. Certain collective archetypes emerge. Over-romanticizing the past. I'm not having anything to do with that new cultural trauma stuff because 100 years ago, Koozies didn't have that, and we don't need it now. That was always my favorite. One time I was somewhere, I was talking about how Indians were awesome way back in the day, and a woman says, I don't believe for a minute that there wasn't any fighting or disagreement or conflict. I don't believe for a minute that that didn't happen. And I thought to myself, yeah, neither do I. I don't know why I keep saying it. There's this thing that we rely on. Oh, that's not us. That's Canada. We're First Nations. We did not do that. that can't be your position moving into the future. It's just not really the kind of, it's kind of like living a little bit in a fairy tale. There's certain things we knew were great about our communities, our culture, our sense-making systems, our community systems, but there were we were human beings. Not everything was perfect, so we got to get out of that mindset. For collectively traumatized people, they have a hard time moving into contemporary treatments or therapies or experiments because they were still holding on to that. Before communism, and this was Zellmer's work or Stomper's work, before communism, this is the way we lived, and we want to go back to that. The problem is, this isn't 1950s, this isn't 1930s. The world has changed, and no culture is static. Things are going to be different. We have to be contemporary with the times. One of the areas, and I believe Zellmer's particular area of work was in looking at what happened after the Holocaust. What happens after 10 million people were essentially exterminated? It was difficult to move into a contemporary sense of self because we were still, before it happened, this is the way things were. And we start to use that as an excuse that we don't need to move into anything new. And if we were doing the best that we could do, we wouldn't have any problems. To move beyond the problems that we have to be willing to move beyond those things that we know. And I would imagine in most cases, it means we can't go back to that way of thinking from 100 years ago. We can still have those values and the language and the culture. But if we aren't as complex as the problems that we face, we're done. We can't negotiate continual environmental problems by using strategies and theories from 50 years ago. It just doesn't work. If it works, it doesn't work very well. Another thing that emerged from that entire discussion was there was this political apathy. I won't have anything to do with the new Nation Council because at first we had our own way, and then you made us do it another way, and now this is just another way. I don't want to have anything to do with that. This is really big in our communities. Traditionally, our chiefs weren't elected and didn't go to a building. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Fortunately, that means that all of your contributions, your strategy, your knowledge, your heuristics, your experiences are no longer part of the problem-solving process. There's a tendency for us to be apathetic towards our politics, towards our government. At our own UNACA level, KNC, or our band council, and you could just, I don't want anything to do with that. And I'm just going to complain about it for the next 4 years. It's not really that helpful. But people around the world that have been through colonizing processes or culturally or collectively traumatic processes react the same way. And in a sense, you can't really blame people. For 80 years, our children were taken away, put in schools. We were dispossessed of the most basic thing we should be in charge of, ourselves, our children, our family. So there are going to be some people through that process that say, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't want to be a part of that. And it's a really difficult thing to do. You were dispossessed for 80 years of making those decisions. I understand it might not be comfortable to help take part in those decisions, but there's got to be some way that we can try. And had I done my websites, on my social networks, pulled the data, and just saw these bland, flat, normally distributed visualizations, I probably would have not went into this kind of work. But what I saw was there are these incredibly complex architectures that are emerging. Because people are starting to say, when I first started doing language research in the 90s, everyone said, and literally, people that are your age group told me, there's no reason to learn the language, and we're going to be better off when it's gone. Because for 100 years, that's what they heard from their parents, their parents' parents, and their parents' parents' parents. Why do you even bother? Once it's gone, it won't be an issue for us. And now we're seeing that that's not the case. People really do want to talk about it. They want to make a change. They want to bring that back. Because there's this entropy, there's this disorder, there's this fighting and arguing and bickering and screaming and yelling at one another. There's got to be a way we can address that.